We're looking at the European backdrop of early American history. And we've seen that the Protestant reformers under Luther and the English reformers under Henry VIII and some others have broken away from the Roman Church or the Roman Catholic Church in the early part of the 1500s. Well, in the 1540s, the Roman Catholic Church decides they need to respond. And they're going to gather a group of their leaders at a city called Trent, where they're going to talk about what they can do about these reformations. This is called the Counter-Reformation. And at the Council of Trent, they decided we need to get busy trying to end these protests, these reformations, and bring these wayward people back into the church one way or another. A order was established called the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits. Their leader was a man named Ignatius Loyola, and they exist to this day. If you ever see somebody sign their name and then put SJ after it, that's the designation of a Jesuit. The Jesuits' job was to go out and in some way, shape, or form get these Protestants unconverted or reconverted back into the church. To some degree, they revived the Inquisition, the very difficult and challenging attempt of the church to keep the heretics or to get rid of the heretics, preserve them in the church as faithful or condemn them as infidels. So the Roman Catholic Church also was a major factor in this time of religious upheaval, turmoil, and reformation. Now, the most important religious movement that we need to understand the settlement of the English colonies in America is a movement called Puritanism. When Bloody Mary came to the throne, and I say Bloody Mary from the point of view of a Puritan, I suppose. So I'm sure that there are some who don't think of her that way. But the Puritans were those who left England when Mary came to the throne. They were afraid that she was going to burn them at the stake. And when they left England, they went primarily to a city called Geneva, which is in Switzerland. And in Geneva, they came under the tutelage or the mentorship, the supervision of a man by the name of John Calvin. And John Calvin was the leader of the Protestant movement in Geneva. So these English people who were escaping from Mary were learning Calvin's ideas. Calvin was very strong in terms of a theory called predestination. Calvin believed very strongly that God was totally in control of everything and at all times. There's no such thing as free will. All things happen and are ordained by God from the beginning of time. Now, when these people who are in Geneva running away from England are told that Mary is dead, they decide, hey, we've got a new queen on the throne. She's not as vicious. We can now go back to England. But we're not entirely happy with the English church. We'd like to purify it to become more Calvinist, more like we are. And so they're given the name Puritans. They want to purify the Church of England. They want it to become more predestinarian, more Calvinist at the time. Well, what happens, there are a group of Protestants called Arminians who don't really like the Calvinists very much. They particularly don't like the idea of predestination. So at the Synod of Dort, this is a group of religious leaders, in 1618, the decision is made to condemn the Arminians as heretics because they believe in free will. The leaders there are men such as Gomarus, a fellow by the name of Ames, and some of the pilgrims who will eventually come to America. What the disagreement is about between the Calvinists and the Arminians are 5 points that Calvin articulated and believed implicit in his writings, as it were, that the Arminians rejected. The first point is known as total depravity. Calvin believed that human beings are an absolute mess, and there's nothing they can do to get themselves redeemed. They're totally at the mercy of God. We can't basically use the words that we're dead in sins and trespasses, unable to revive ourselves to life. The second principle is called unconditional election, that among those depraved people, God elects, that means chooses, without any reason, without any conditions. He chooses certain ones to receive his grace. The third point is called limited atonement. It means those whom God has selected to receive his grace, Jesus died for. And Jesus only died for them. Because if Jesus died for the whole world, then the whole world would have to be saved, or else there would be what we refer to today as double jeopardy. Jesus paying the penalty and them paying the penalty both. And that was illogical to Calvin. So the atonement only was made for those who God had chosen it to be. The fourth point is called irresistible grace. Irresistible grace is the idea that if God chooses you, then in fact you will be faithful. He'll turn your heart into a faithful heart, and you will believe and you will trust. If God has chosen you, you don't have a say in the matter. You will in fact become one of his followers. And the fifth point is known as perseverance of the saints, and that means if God indeed chooses you, he'll see to it that your whole life is one of persistence and perseverance, and that you'll die in the same faithful state that you were chosen. Now, this leads to all kinds of controversies, theological and philosophical, even political controversies. One of the questions is, how do I know I'm chosen? Well, the Puritans are going to go so far. Luther wouldn't have liked this, but they're going to go so far as say, you know you're chosen by your fruits, your good deeds. If you do good deeds, that means that you're one of the chosen. They also brought with them the Geneva Bible. They rejected the King James Bible because it was Church of England, and they used the Bible that they translated with Calvin's help back in Geneva. And again, they desired a more pure church. So these were the people who, when we were talking about Charles, were the ones who declared war on King Charles because he was an almost outright Catholic. And so the Puritans decided we need to go to war against him. They in fact beat him, put him on trial, and beheaded him. The Puritan leader of the army that fought Charles I was a man named Oliver Cromwell, who, when Charles was beheaded, became the leader of England. He didn't like the term king. He preferred the term Lord Protector. So Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell ruled over England for a period of time after Charles was beheaded. This led to the establishment of an assembly of theologians in London at Westminster Abbey. They put together something called the Westminster Confession, the Westminster Catechism, and these documents became the foundational documents for most people who lived in New England for the first 100 years or so. And then even beyond that, those documents had a pretty significant amount of power and authority over many people who call themselves English Americans. And these were the people, these Puritans, by and large, were the people who colonized New England, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, etc. The Puritans came to New England, and we'll talk more about that as we go on.